Alex Caruso traded for Josh Giddey a few days later. It's been a few days since I posted my initial reaction to this trade, and I've had a little bit of time to stew on it. Mostly because it's been the only trade that we've had so far, which I don't think is going to be the case for very long. I think with this draft, there's going to be a lot of movement this week. Now, I don't feel like I'm an expert on any of these prospects individually, but that's mostly because I haven't dug in that deep, because for the past several years now, it feels like, at least a couple, all we've heard about is how bad this draft class is. And by that, it's missing the elite talent at the top and the sure things or the home run swings, that kind of thing. I've regularly heard it described as kind of starting at a 7 or 8 pick, meaning that the top guys in this draft would typically have the talent of somebody we would expect to go in the mid to late lottery or later in the draft. And what I think that means is that these teams are going to have much shorter lists of guys that they feel comfortable drafting, and they're going to be picking a little bit more for need, and that means they might have to adjust their draft position in order to put themselves in the right spot to get the guy that they want, which can be trading up, maybe even trading back. And some teams are probably going to figure out that they just can't get into the position that they want and turn into facilitators, offering up their slot to another team to get the guy that they want in exchange for value. Because I still think there's going to be good players coming out of this draft, and I definitely don't anticipate like the Donovan Mitchell for the first overall pick type of a blockbuster insane trade, but I think there's going to be a lot of wheeling and dealing and moving around for the teams to get the guys that they feel like are going to be those standout picks from this draft class. But for now, we have Alex Caruso for Josh Giddey. And I gotta say that even a couple days later, I still like this deal a lot for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Like, a lot. This team was 3rd in the league in steals and 2nd in blocks. They are very, very good defensively. And they're not just a solid defensive team, they're also a very disruptive defensive team. And Alex Caruso is a guy who trailed only 2 players in the entire NBA in steals per game last season, one of them being his new teammate, SGA, and the other being De'Aaron Fox. He also averaged a full block a game. That's not like 0.7 and I'm rounding up. He averaged 1.0 blocks per game, and as a 6'5 guard who plays in the backcourt, that's more than solid. I think it was still top 30 in the league of all players. He's going to fit into this defense like a glove. Yeah, kind of like that glove. Where I had a little bit of, I guess, hesitation or even just like needed to ruminate a little bit is in 2 areas for the Thunder side of this deal. One was Caruso's shooting. I've never thought of Alex Caruso as a real like knockdown floor spacer and definitely not a volume shooter. But then I went back and looked, and last year he actually shot 41% from 3, and he had increased his volume to almost 5 attempts per game. That's by far the most attempts that he's shot, and his percentage increased with the additional attempts. If he can keep that up, and if that's real and doesn't regress back to his career averages from a 3-point shooting standpoint, or he doesn't become more timid and take less, like that's a legitimate upgrade from a spacing perspective, especially over a guy like Giddey who only took a couple and he didn't make almost any. That's a hyperbole, okay? I know he shot like 33% from 3 on like whatever it was, 3 attempts. Okay, that's fine. But if you can increase the volume and the percentage with a guy like Caruso and he can keep that up, that's a big difference for the Thunder than what they were getting with Giddey. And it kind of takes away one of the potential concerns I could see with him. Because, again, my brain always goes back to Lakers Caruso, who was more of a cutter and like a timely 3-point shot maker, not a bad 3-point shooter, just not a high volume and not a particularly high percentage guy. If that has changed, then that's a huge deal. The other thing that I was a little bit worried about is that you were just going to have to bank in missed time for Caruso, like in a significant amount of it. Like he's always been a guy that I think of as like, you he could potentially only be playing half the season, 40, 50 games, and you're just going to have to figure out what to do in the meantime. And while I think that the Thunder have plenty of depth to cover up for some time missed, if he's going to miss substantial chunks and you plan for him to be in closing lineups, like, that's not a great recipe for consistency for this team, particularly a team who was a 1 seed last year, still young, still looking to try to not only continue with the winning that they were doing last year, but also go kind of to the next level in games that matter, right? And make playoff runs. And if you're worried about the guy being there, it takes some of the shine off of the deal. But again, I went back and looked. He played 71 games for the Bulls last year. And the year before, 67. And if he's going to be that durable, I'm no longer concerned, because then you're just talking about spot starts and kind of getting through a week here maybe for some kind of, tweak that he got because he plays so hard and gives up like his body in so many instances that he's going to get some bumps and bruises, and he's probably going to miss a few games here and there. But if it's a few games here and there, you can easily get past that, as opposed to if he was going to miss like half the year, right? Like, huge difference in those things, and I have a lot less concern about his durability if he can keep that type of pace up that he's seen over the past couple of years. All in all, the fact is, he's just kind of the perfect role-playing guard who's perfectly happy, it seems, to get his in the flow of the offense and just be an absolute hound on the defensive end. And Thunder fans are going to love him. And bonus, you still have a lot of cap space, and you didn't have to move a single one of your 7,000 picks that you have to make this happen. You can still make significant moves to upgrade this roster even more. Now for the Chicago side. This one I'm a little less sold. So I was fairly optimistic in my initial review and my initial reaction to this one for the Bulls, because I was thinking of it purely from the standpoint of Giddey and Coby White, who could be fairly complementary to each other in a young backcourt. And that I still believe to be true. Giddey's 21, Coby White's 24. White is more of a volume shooter and kind of a scoring type of a guard, while Giddey is more of a facilitator that doesn't really shoot. That's what made him such a difficult fit in OKC this past year, because you don't want to take the ball out of SGA's hands. The dude was having literally an MVP caliber season. And if Giddey's not going to be a spacer and he can't do the one thing that's his biggest strength, like, it just doesn't really, it doesn't offer up a lot of value off the ball with Josh Giddey. In Chicago, there's a world in which this could theoretically be a really nice pairing in which he's the one doing the ball handling and the distributing, while Coby White is working off the ball and scoring and then being a secondary playmaker. That can fit. They're both young enough, right? As I said before, 21 and 24. They can grow together, and you've got something for like a youth movement in Chicago. Here's the thing. It only makes sense for the Bulls if they are rebuilding, and these are two young building blocks. I'm not going to say that they're building the team, around these two, because I don't think they're quite good enough to warrant that level, but I do think that they are easily good enough to be two solid pieces in a rebuild. They're both good young basketball players with upside still. But what about this Chicago Bulls franchise has told you that they have any intention of doing a rebuild? Which means that they would likely intend to bring back DeMar DeRozan. They've still got Vooch. Zach LaVine should finally get traded, but who knows what kind of value, if any, that contract is going to bring you back at this point with his health concerns and everything else, second apron worries for teams that are in contending position. And I don't know. I just don't know what to expect with a Zach LaVine train. I don't think that you can bank on that bringing you back a lot of value. And if that's not going to bring you back a bunch of picks or young talent, then what about this team sounds like a team that is building around this young backcourt? Sounds like a team with one shooter on the entire roster, no spacing whatsoever, and they just moved 15% of their three-point shooting volume on a team that was already bottom 5 in the league for a guy who can't shoot. Now, if they actually tear it down and move off of these 33 and 34-year-old guys, bring in some younger talent to get a look at, prioritize youth, and build this thing moving forward, I still think this trade makes some sense. But to me, chances are this Bulls team is just hellbent on mediocrity, and they've got their eyes on the 10 seed. And if that's the case, I think this trade makes a lot less sense than I thought it might initially. Let me know in the comments, do you think this Bulls franchise is actually gearing towards a youth movement and a rebuild? Or are they doing some kind of weird two-timeline, we still want to make the play-in kind of a strange balance here? And also, do the like and subscribe stuff, because it makes me feel warm and fuzzy and it tells YouTube that these videos don't suck.